Hello and good evening. Welcome everyone to Night's Last Call. My name is Derek Melinda, welcoming you back to another exciting episode of Night's Last Call, where we are going to be discussing, that's right, we're going to be discussing player skill. This was a patron topic voted today by our patrons, submitted by our patrons who voted on which topic they wanted to see talked about this evening. So here we are. We're going to be talking about it. And of course, if you're new to our channel, welcome. I am just one member of a group that talks about RPGs of all sorts and types, and we have a very large, active, and thriving Patreon community. We'd be honored if you come and join us. Check us out, patreon.com/nightslastcall. And while you're here, make sure to hit that like button and leave a comment. We'll try to get some engagement. Yay. Anyways. So yeah, we'll get into it here in a little bit. But in essence, tonight we're just going to be talking. I'm going to be talking with you. Got my chat window right here, and we'll be kind of figuring out how do you handle, or what are some of the issues, or what are some of the concerns, or how do you manage when you have a group where you have players of wildly different abilities. And this can mean a lot of different things depending on the game system that we're talking about. Certainly there is a kind of a game aspect to it, right? What I will call the tactical aspect of it. And by that, I'm really talking about combat mostly. But then there's the other side of it, which is sort of more of the creative part, the role-playing aspects of the game, the problem solving, and the sort of just being agency-filled part of the game. And all of those things. Now, of course, what does better player mean to you? Of course, it could mean a lot of different things. Really, it kind of comes down to the type of game that that you're playing. But so that's what we're going to get into. If you have questions, feel free to drop them in chat. If you want to drop a super chat or a tip, you can use our Stream Elements link in the description below, or you can type !tip. That'll give you a link. That's a way to give us a direct tip. Or if you want to do it through YouTube and use Super Chat, you can also use the Super Chat interface. That'll appear on screen. Everyone will get a nice little alert and message, and we'll make sure that we focus on your question. But that being said, I appreciate everybody being here, and I will try my best to answer any and all questions that you all have that may be pertaining to this topic, or maybe our topic adjacent. So London is here and says, can we please start with carpentry tips to balance a literal table? Sure. That's real easy to do. All you need to do is install leg levelers. You should probably do that anyways, but in your legs, you just, you counter bore, usually with a Forstner bit or something like that, an inset, and then you screw in a self-adjust or a manually adjusting feet levelers. And that way, even if the table is set onto a not perfectly flat floor, you can dial and adjust those in until you get rid of any sort of wobble or play, and then you lock it in and you're good to go. That's the easiest way to do it. Failing that, you can just take like a piece of paper, fold it in half a couple dozen times or whatever, and shove it under one of the corners. Karama is here and says that I shouldn't be talking about builds because I hate builds. It's true, I do. So you know what? You got me. You correct. Did I even stop streaming with Steven yet? I had just enough time to eat half a bowl of chili and take the dogs for a quick walk, and now we're back. And we're back. Good evening, Pepper. Hello, Ikemos. Solana, greetings. Beowulf, we are starting, buddy. Can't stop this train. Mark, yeah, still not a good thumbnail. Sorry, buddy. I would say I'm trying, but I'm not. Not yet. Listen, when we get a lot of people in here, it's annoying. Ken, hello. No, I mean, it's something that comes up a lot, and there's actually sort of a systemic reason for why this is a problem, and we'll get into that here, for sure. And it has to do with just the way that people are introduced to the game. See, okay, KC is here. Hello, KC, DJ Hype Man, Erica. Hello. Of course, you just repolarize the plasma manifolds, invert the neutrino flow, and reverse the flux capacitor. Keith, welcome as well. Sail Away is here as well. Hello, Sail Away. So at a high level, I think what cloaks into lurk mode. Welcome. Awesome. Fantastic. And Henry is here too. Welcome, Henry. Rocking his loyalty badge for being a member of the adventure, joining our YouTube channel as well as our Patreon. Henry, nice work. So let's first and foremost talk about why I think, in general, we have done players a great disservice. And the reason that I say that is because I can't speak for everyone of a certain age, but my introduction to Dungeons and Dragons came through the basic sets and came through the game at a time when it was far less complex. And the premise of the game was very simple. You know, you didn't even start, there was no box text. You oftentimes, you just started in the dungeon. You know, the GM would give you like this, you know, like you have ventured for several days and now find yourselves at the foot of a great and mighty ancient temple. You know, it looks like one of those Mayan kind of pyramid things. Ancient vines withered with age hang heavily over the surface of the pyramid. And at the top of a long flight of crumbling stone steps, you can see a yawning archway beyond which lies darkness that leads into the temple. What do you do? And the game would literally just start with you like playing the game. You were just in the game. You had to go do what you had to do. It kind of reminds me of in ways of like Final Fantasy VII. You watch Final Fantasy VII, there's a very short intro video, and then you're on the train and it's coming in and you hop off the train and we're going, right? And you're just playing the game. But here's the important part. Now, at this time, you know, your characters were so simple and so basic and so primitive. And as a result, the mental capacity or the mental ask that you were asking your players to learn was pretty simple. I mean, in terms of modern game design, back then, basic D&D was like algebra. And sure, the players showed up. They didn't know algebra. You had to teach them basic addition, multiplication, subtraction, and then pretty quickly you're at algebra. There's a learning curve, but it's short and it's manageable. Modern day RPGs, and I'm not just talking about the ones that you might think obvious, Pathfinder 2, right? But I'm also talking about games like, you know, to a certain extent, like Blades in the Dark and Dungeon World, which I do think ask a lot of the players in terms of their abilities and their capabilities. And as a result, those games, Pathfinder 2, Blades in the Dark, they're like, you know, calculus, right? Very advanced, and you can use them and they're brilliant and they change the world and they're fantastic game systems, but they are very complex. And to truly understand the nuance of them requires a lot of effort. And I should say, actually, it requires two things. It requires an ability to really learn that some people just don't, they're not good with numbers. They're not good with being creative on the spot. You know, it's just a natural ability. But the other side of it is when something is more difficult, it also requires time and investment to get better at it, to master basic Dungeons and Dragons. I'm talking about 1980s basic D&D. I mean, that required, you know, a better part of a couple hours. Whereas these modern games, I mean, you could literally watch entire YouTube channels dedicated to just how to optimize one small part of the whole overall game as they talk about 2 of the 6 uses of the athletic skills. Okay. Guilty as charged talking about that. So, you know, and I've seen a lot of people, and I'm honored, I'm flattered, right? When they say, oh, you know, I loved your combat and tactics videos, Derek. We're about to start playing Pathfinder 2, and I sent my players those videos. And I kind of don't know if that's the best thing to do, because I think it can cause people to lose that fundamental foundation of what it means to be a good player. and it has really nothing to do with the system. It has nothing to do with your acting ability or your creative ability. It has to do fundamentally with this understanding of how role-playing games interface, how it's a conversation. I mean, this is some PBTA stuff, but of course PBTA was just building on the fundamental building blocks of role-playing games. Anyways, it's a conversation. It's a back and forth. It's different than other games that you've played because I'm the dungeon master and I'm your eyes and your ears. You ask questions, I respond. I ask you questions, you respond. That formulaic basis is at the core of all role-playing games. And if a player doesn't have that mastered, then all the rest of the stuff falls apart. And again, 30 years ago, when I learned how to play D&D, 32 years ago, when I learned to play D&D, the game was, I mean, you could literally fit your entire character on a note card, you know, and that was it. It was just dead simple. Now, I'm not saying that is necessarily the best thing because, of course, there's advantages to having a game be more complex and interesting. And I'm not even necessarily talking about like whether or not a simple game is better today. What I am saying is that by getting the mechanics and getting the sort of like the deep storytelling and the you know, coming up with a creative story arc that is also interesting and would be good for the home audience, when you get all that stuff out of the way and it's not part of your game, there is a sort of primal joy that comes from playing role-playing games. It's that nugget that I think created the boom and the explosion of role-playing games in the 70s and the 80s. But I also think, in a certain way, it explains to a certain degree why Dragonbane has been so popular and so successful, at least in our little micro community that is the Knights of the Last Call community. And I think the reason is because there are a lot of people who've been playing maybe RPGs for years, but they've been sort of struggle bussing in a way because they came into the game without any of those fundamentals. They came in at Pathfinder 2, or they came in at 3rd edition D&D, where it was already car op, you know, pun, min-max, just, you know, all your different magical item slots, all your different item bonuses and status bonuses and circumstance bonuses and holy bonuses and insight bonuses and dodge bonuses and haste bonuses. And what's your armor class? What's your flat-footed AC? What's your touch AC, right? That's where they joined the game. And so they never got that basic understanding. Now, you know, props to them. They struggled through, but just like someone who is, you know, going on to get a degree in math, but never really learned the basics of mathematics, there's always this sort of primal struggle I see with a lot of people who have not really fully understood the core interface of what a role-playing game is. And I know that there's starter games and there are starter boxes. You know, Pathfinder has one, D&D has one, but fundamentally these are games that are designed to get you to that more complicated game, right? They're the game that's designed to sort of be a stepping stone to get you quickly into that more advanced version of the game, which is fine, which is good. But I do think that there's a whole generation of players who kind of missed the memo on why role-playing games are so amazing and so unique and so different. And without that baseline, I think it's very difficult for a lot of people to ever catch up. So that's not really advice because you can't like fundamentally change the way that people have seen the game. But I will say that I think that there is a lot of value in picking a game like Dragonbane or like Old School Essentials as the game that you introduce people to to role-playing games with, simply because it gets out of the way. And it really gets back to the core premise of the game. And that gives people this very super strong, solid foundation that they can build upon about that. So that's more of just like a generic thought. Let me know what you think. And again, the games are become more complex because, you know, just like, I mean, think about it. If you're a kid in school today, you've got to learn you know, 300 years worth of 400 years worth of math, you know, but if you were a kid in school in the 1800s, you only had to learn 200 years of math, right? Like it's starting in a new game today is a lot harder than it was 20 or 30 years ago. And we just had to learn that sort of basics. And I think that's where people really fundamentally struggle with that. How close is this, Hugh, to why you like Fate Accelerated as intro game? I think it's very close, although I would say that, you know, it is very similar to the reasoning. Because it's really just very minimal. It is, you know, I mean, to a certain extent, I almost think that you could have an RPG. I mean, Bob's first RPG that he played with me, I just had a D6 and I said, you know, roll it. And I was basically like, and if you get a 4 or higher, you know, you succeed. If you get a 1, 2, or 3, you fail. And that was it, you know? And the mechanic doesn't have to be exciting for the game to be good when people are first started, and that you need to teach them to be engaging and inquisitive, because I think a lot of times what comes down to when you talk about skill level differences between players, it really just comes down to who are engaged, you know, who are your players that are engaged with the game, engaged with the world, engaged with the meta system itself. Those are the people who are really going to step up. And I don't know that there's an easy fix for a player who isn't really that interested in being there. You know, that's a tough one to that's a tough row to hoe. That being said, I think there are some basic concepts that we can talk about, that we can explore. So the first is, you know, you're going to have a player who's the good player, right? Maybe they really know the system well. They know how to build a really good character. Or, you know, they're really creative and they're really smart. Maybe they're very charismatic. You know, they stand out. You know, they, you know, I don't want to say that they hog the spotlight, not necessarily. But, you know, they definitely take their fair share of it. Now, that player can either be a source of great strength or great weakness for you, because it really comes down to is that player a narcissistic asshole? If that player is a narcissistic asshole, then you got a problem. But I have played games with newer and brand new players, with people like Smith, who I've played with for many, many years. And Smith's a great player, very creative, funny, all the good things. But he's also very, very, very aware of his role at the table, which is to be a mentor, which is to, you know, encourage other players who might need that encouragement. Now, of course, this depends on, you know, your relationship with those people. Sometimes when it's, you know, when it's dealing with Bob, it's Smith, you know, calling him an idiot and asking him what his magic missile spells does. And Bob saying, I don't remember. So, you know, sometimes it's a little tough love, but he, you know, he as a sort of a quote unquote advanced player, he's making it part of his responsibility to elevate the team, right? He doesn't see it as his character or his experience. He sees it as, we are team player, and I want to have the best team that I can possibly have. And so part of it is identifying who your good players are and really kind of focusing on, are they in it for themselves or are they in it for the other people? Because if they're in it for the other people, then you have a good shot. If they are really just, they want to be the strongest and the best and the most powerful, that's not really a skill problem. That's just a player being kind of a narcissist problem. And that is, you know, potentially a bigger problem than anything that we might easily solve here. That being said, there are some fairly simple solutions. So if we're talking about a more complicated tactical game, like Pathfinder 2, for example, or perhaps D&D 4th edition, one great option is to take that character or the player who's really, really good at the game, so to speak, and either one, and again, they have to be willing to compromise. If they're just going to play the character OP character, you're going to have a problem no matter what you do. But you can basically say, hey, you're really good at this game, and the other players are not. So I don't want you to feel like you are, you know, having to do all the heavy lifting, and I don't want them to feel like they are not contributing anything. So why don't you maybe potentially play a class that is considered to not be as strong or not as good. So in Pathfinder 2nd Edition or 4th Edition D&D, or even in 5th Edition D&D, there are plenty of classes that a lot of people say, quote unquote, aren't good, right? They're C tier, or, I'm not saying you have to be an F tier class. I'm just saying don't pick, if you're playing Pathfinder 2, don't pick the best class in the game. Pick one of the mid or low tier classes that isn't as overwhelming mechanically in the game, just to give other people the breathing space, and vice versa. Okay, if you are a GM and you've got a new player who's playing Pathfinder 2 for the first time, I don't care what they like. Don't let them be an oracle, or don't let them be a witch. You probably shouldn't even let them be a wizard. This is another thing. Old school D&D knew it was up, right? They used to basically say, the fighter's great. It's kind of a simple class. It may not be the strongest one, but the wizard is an advanced class, and it's not for new players. We mean in like, you need experience with this game in order to play this character. Nowadays, there's this idea of like every class is for everyone, even if it's your first time playing the game. I completely and fully disagree with that. If you have a new player to the game who, let's just call it what it is. Let's say they suck at combat or something in D&D or Pathfinder 2. You give them a fighter, right? You give them a fighter, you give them 2 weapons, you give them double strike and dual slash, and you let them go do their thing. And you give them an 18 strength and you send them on their way. They will perform at a level that will put them at par or above what other people are doing at the game. As an example of this, when we were playing our Abomination Vaults campaign, we had a couple of untimely deaths. Bob's Barbarian died. He came back as a kineticist. Aaron's Sorcerer lived through the whole ordeal, so he was still Sorcerer. And then our buddy George was playing a rogue, and he died. So, as we had a kineticist and a sorcerer, 2 classes that I consider to be very, very, very high tier. And so he decided to make a fighter, because it was like we were talking about how powerful it would be to have a fighter, a kineticist, and a sorcerer. But our buddy George, he's a bit of a troll, and he decided to make like a horrible fighter. Like he didn't like purposely, destroy his character with like a 12 strength or something. But, he did not choose the double slash. He chose like, he took not free. We didn't have free archetype. So he took archetype and like the gladiator archetype, and he had like net proficiency and like a trident. And he had like, it was really stupid. His character crushed. His character absolutely crushed. He was trying to basically show like, I can still make a shitty character even with a fighter. Guess what? His character way overperformed, did more damage than everybody else. He was still critting and ripping people apart, and they were bleeding, and it was still a sight to be seen. The fighter is just kind of fire and forget. So identify in your game, what are the classes that don't ask a lot of the player and are kind of hard to screw up. This is kind of an off topic thing, but there are cards in Magic the Gathering that let you like look at the top of your deck and then pick a card and then put the other cards back. So basically it's giving you a choice. And if you're a good player, every time you're given a choice, your odds of winning go up, because you are going to have an opportunity to make a good decision. But if you're bad at the game, the more choices and the more inflection points that you get is actually going to lower your chance of winning, because you're more likely to make a mistake which will hurt you in the long term. So you need to figure out what classes are simple and easy to play. Now, going back to original D&D, to basic D&D, the game basically said, if you're new to this game, you don't get to be a wizard. That's way too much. But clerics, they didn't even get spells at level 1. All right. Rogues, or I should say thieves, right? Fighters, these were all super basic characters. So many of the character classes were just basically almost mechanically transparent. And so the only thing that was left was you just playing the game. So in modern day games, we don't have that, but we still do have classes. Let's call it. There are classes that are simple. There are classes that are complex. There are classes that are effective. And then there are classes that are ineffective. So what I'm saying is, if you're really, really good at the game, why don't you pick a class that isn't as powerful? And if you are new to the game or bad at the game, choose a class or be encouraged by the GM to pick a class that is going to be very powerful, right? Just on its own, hard to screw up, okay? Second thing, if you're a really good player, this is something that Smith does a lot. If you're a really good player and you don't want to play a quote unquote crap class, then play a support role. Pick up the bard and spend your turn buffing the other characters. Pick up, a cleric or a druid or even a wizard, but who focuses on casting haste spells and, buffing spells or maybe debuffing spells on the enemy. Be that support player, that mentor player, both at the table as a player, but also as a PC. Your character can kind of become like the group's, a teacher or mentor, because you're letting the other people, you're setting them up. The other players are knocking them down. And that's a fantastic way to do a great back and forth. And in fact, a story, which I'm pretty sure Smith and I have talked about before on the channel, is that when we played 3rd edition D&D, which of course was, infamous for, how broken spellcasters were, so-called, Codzillas, cleric and druids, and even wizards were really, really powerful. But I played a lot of wizards, Smith we had a lot of clerics and stuff, but we never had that problem of those classes seeming oppressive. And I'll tell you why. When I was a wizard, sure, I'd throw a fireball every once in a while. But you know what I did most of the time? I cast haste or slow or resist energy, or I cast, if I was a druid, I cast entangle, I cast bark skin. I cast these supporting spells because I knew how powerful my character was. And yeah, every so often, I'd let him know what's up. I let him know who's boss, right? But by and large, my role was just to encourage the other players, both in character and out of character. And so I really think that a great way for really good characters is really good players is to pick a character class that is sort of not the main protagonist type. Right? There are some classes in the game, if we're talking about a standard F20 game, that are a little bit more, they're more protagonists. They're more like the person who's in the front. Now, it says buff spells were OP in 3rd edition. I agree, but that's why I'm saying cast them on your fellow players who maybe aren't as good as you. I remember plenty of times where we would have a character who maybe wasn't the best player at the game. They were a barbarian or whatever. And, the wizard would cast stone skin on the barbarian and the druid would cast bull strength on the barbarian. And you know what I mean? They'd buff the noob up and just, they'd go to town and they'd, crush it. Am I hearing birds? Yes, my window is open. It's the springtime. There are birds chirping out there. Because, one of the things, and Shamacron is getting to the point here. I always say this as any player, game master or player, just as a human being sitting at a gaming table, your number one concern should be, am I contributing to the fun of the people around me? That includes my fellow players. That includes my game master. The second rule is, am I having fun? You shouldn't not have fun at just so other people can have fun. That's not fair to you either. You should worry about yourself, but worry about other people first. Because in theory, it means there's a bunch of other people at the game that are also worried back about you. But you, as a good player, you should really embrace that sort of, and that's why I hesitate to call it a leader role, because a leader role can be, and I don't mean like literally leader role, like from 4th edition D&D. I mean, like, you don't want to be the sergeant. You don't want to be the lieutenant. You don't want to be giving orders. No. That's why I use the term mentor, right? In that you are not there to tell them what to do. You are there to support them. You are there to answer their questions. You are there to offer them choices and let them decide. That is something that I do as a player all the time. Now, I know what the answer is. I mean, I could be wrong, but let's call it what it is. But Bob will say something to me, like when we were playing in Smith's Pathfinder 2 campaign, he would frequently ask me, like, what spell should I take? I just leveled up. I got my new spell from Sorcerer. And I knew that the answer was probably like Chain Lightning or something. But I would try to be, I wouldn't try to be like nudge, nudge, wink, wink. I would say, well, there's a couple of great options at level 6. You could consider spell A, it does this, and it does that. If you think you need more damage ability, that'd be a good spell for it. You could also go with this spell, which is obviously not damaging, but gives you a ton of utility and a lot of flexibility. If you think that you've got damage covered, maybe that's a good choice for you. And then the last option is blah, 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 blah. None of those were bad spells. None of those were bad options. Obviously, in my personal opinion, there was one that was the correct one and the best one, but I'm not going to tell them that. And even if Bob pushed me, I would not tell them because I do not want to play their character from them. In cooperative board games, this is called like quarterbacking or the alpha player. I absolutely hate that. And for me, even when someone asks me a question directly, I will oftentimes not answer it if I feel like I am the better player and I have a much higher level of skill than the rest of the players in the game. What I will do is offer my advice, and I will essentially function as a mentor. I will function as sort of a pseudo DM or game master where I'm going to help guide. It's the move from Avatar Legends PBTA. I will guide and comfort my proteges so that they can learn on their own. In the meantime, I'm playing a class that either is a little underperforming or is very support, heavy. My fellow players who might not be really good at the game, I'm not giving them a class that's going to make their head explode. I'm giving them something that's simple and easy to pick from. This is not the time to be plumbing the depths of the, APG or some crazy feat that came out of some book. Just focus on the basics, because even though these games are very complicated nowadays, you still want to, at some level, get back to what I was talking about before with the original basic D&D, or even to a certain extent, Dragonbane. Because when a player, and this really became clear to me just recently, when I have heard Bob talk again and again, and I've heard from people who he's played with, Bob feels like, and his players seem to suggest the same, and I've played with Bob a couple times, and I had the opportunity to play as a player under him in a game of Dragonbane. And I can tell you that Bob did way better as a game master for Dragonbane. And even Bob says, I feel like I'm a much better game master for Dragonbane. And he believes, and I think he's correct, that the reason is because there's less rules, there's less mechanics, there's less squares to count and bonuses to calculate. He can focus on the core element of the game, which is communicating, conversating, what's going on in the fiction, what should happen next, and everything else kind of fades into the background, and that's all we really need to focus on. Until such time as the mechanics need to be rolled, we roll a dice. It's very simple, it's easy, it's elegant. You just go with it and you go with the flow. So by getting out of the way, a lot of these modern day games, in theory, are designed to be super complicated so that they make it easier for you. I don't know that I buy that. I actually think that part of the problem with these games is like, again, if you're really good at basic D&D versus being really bad at basic D&D, the gap between you, the skill gap between you is fairly small. But for a player who doesn't know what the hell they're doing in Pathfinder 2 or 5th edition D&D versus a player who really, really knows what they're doing, the gap in performance between those two characters can be immense. And so this is kind of a modern problem. So, from the purpose of like combat and tactics, I think my general advice is get them to be that mentor, get them to be that character that is in the support role, get them to have an honest conversation. Now, if a player, the gap may very well have been at its widest in 3.x London. Absolutely. Yeah. So I actually agree with both of these statements. I think 4th edition and 5th edition closed that gap. I think it was at its absolute highest in 3rd edition. There's no doubt about that. Yeah, London gets the points, not you. So yeah, for sure. The other thing is, to X's point here, a lot of times if you're a very proactive player, or I should say, if you're a very good player, right, and you're playing the lane, the bard that, really doesn't do anything but sing, well, chances are probably pretty good that you're also the type of player who everybody kind of looks to, that the spotlight naturally finds its way to you anyways, right? So even if your character mechanically is very boring per se, you probably are still getting more than your fair share of influence on the game. It may not necessarily be in terms of mechanics, but it definitely is probably the case that your character is getting more than their fair share of the spotlight time. That being said, I'm not saying that just because you're a good player, you should be made to suffer. Again, rule number 1, make sure everybody else at the table is having a great time. Rule number 2, make sure that you're having a good time. You shouldn't have to martyr yourself. I've seen that before happen too, and it did not work out well. I always talk about Aaron, and I talk about how great of a player he is. And there was a group once, and he was looking at the group, and he goes, "Oh, you fucking guys, you're so stupid. We're all gonna die. Fine, I'll be the cleric." And he chose to be a cleric, and he had a miserable time. And the campaign did not last, and it kind of fell apart. That wasn't necessarily just his fault, but I was just saying, like, I think afterwards he realized there used to be a joke, like a meme in our group, which was Aaron. We would start to do something, and Aaron would say, "But no clerics." Just because it was, he didn't want to just be a heal bot. He felt like he had to be one. No one should have to suffer just because they're good at the game. But there is nothing wrong with giving people a little bit of an extra challenge. Also, I don't think this is completely crazy. Okay. Yeah, the heal bot problem is real in so many fantasy games. Absolutely, Derek. And there was a game that did a pretty good job of getting rid of the heal bot, and it was 4th edition D&D. But again, they were trying to solve very specific D&D problems with that edition of the game. I think with some of the bonus action spells from 5th edition, they get close, but nothing will beat Healing Word or just Second Wind in general, in terms of its ability to heal a party member, either yourself or another party member, while still getting to do your cool thing on your turn. That was the most important part. As a cleric, when I play D&D, of course I want to spend resources to heal and buff my party. That's part of the reason I wanted to be a cleric. But what I don't want to do is just literally spend my entire turn healing. And Solana, we could get off on a separate tangent of this, but honestly, that was Aaron's main. I was the GM. Aaron was a player. Aaron's main complaint when we played Fabula Ultima was just that it felt like he was kind of playing a white mage, and he basically felt like, I feel like I should be just healing all the time, because that really does feel like it's the best option, and it kind of stinks that it takes up my whole turn. I am of a big belief that 4th edition D&D just absolutely 100% nailed the way that healing works, and gets rid of the heal bot problem tremendously. But yeah, so point is that you can, sort of set this up so that the character is playing this kind of support character, right? Now, listen, when I played EverQuest, right, an MMO, where you could be a warrior or a wizard who blasts opponents, or a necromancer with a powerful skeletal pet, undead pet that can wreak havoc, and you can go solo dragons. I used to play an enchanter, okay? And Aaron would play a bard, and we would join these groups. These are just completely support characters. I love being a support character. I don't necessarily know that I love being a heal bot, but I do love being a support character. I mean, we could go off onto an entire tangent about how good to be honest with you, Derek, all the racial abilities were amazing. They felt so cool and powerful. But yes, dwarves getting to Second Wind as a minor action was beautiful. Chef's kiss. Big fan. And I'd like to, not to go off, Yeah. So Healbot is definitely, yeah, I agree. Healbot is different than support. It is different. And I think the reason for this, by the way, is that, is that there's a feeling when you're a healer that like you're being selfish if you don't take your turn to heal somebody who's getting hurt, because then if they die or they go down, it's your fault. And especially if they go down to unconsciousness and then they essentially skip their turn because they're unconscious. Again, sometimes it's unconscious, but you can't help but feel this way, that you feel like you're not getting to play because the cleric player was, quote, being selfish and, quote, wouldn't heal because they wanted to, cast a searing light spell or cast an inner radiance, torrent, even though, quote, that wasn't the optimal line. It just creates a lot of negative incentives, a lot of problems that, incorporate into the game. And this has become more of a problem in modern day games because in older versions of D&D, magic was pretty limited resource and hit points were more of an ablative resource that, kind of slowly dribbled down over the course of an entire adventuring day. If you had 50 hit points in, D&D second edition or something, you were not expected to lose 40 to 55 hit points in every single fight. That would have been insane. Your character would never have made it. Instead, your character was maybe expected to lose, 10 to 20 hit points for every fight, which means that if you're at full hit points, you essentially were like, short of us running into a Baylor, my character is fine. Now, I took some damage. I'm down to 30 hit points. I'm still almost assuredly fine. Now, after that second fight, my character's at 15, and then I go to the cleric and I say, hey, cleric, can I get a heal? And the cleric goes, sure, buddy, and gives me a cure serious wounds, and I heal myself back up to 37 or 38, and I'm good for another fight or two. Maybe I have to be a little bit more defensive. But the point is, a lot of the healing was still sort of out of combat. The idea of mid-combat healing was kind of like an oh shit emergency button. It wasn't supposed to be something that was like literally happening every round where you're just spam chain healing. That is a very modern concept, which I don't like. So, not a drummer who played a fighter in one of our 4th edition campaigns had a power called Third Wind, which let him also spend a healing surge for a minor action on top of his second wind. But it was very funny because a lot of times he would use his third wind before he used his second wind. It was kind of funny. Yeah. Healing is very difficult. There's no doubt about it. If I ever wanted to create some sort of fantasy heartbreaker game, I think one of the things that would get me most tripped up would be healing. It's just really, really problem, Right. Well, Karima, you're joking, but also not. I mean, what Karima's talking about here, by the way, is, like if you're playing an MMO and you're in a raid group or a hero group and, a character's saying, heal me, and you're just, standing in some AoE fire effect, the cleric basically says, you want to get healed? I'm not healing you until you start playing better. Sadly, while that is very antagonistic and it's very, very, conflict inducing and not something that I think any of us would want at our personal home tables, the fact of the matter is it works, right? And players learn the school of hard knocks. So, we talk about player disparity. One of the things that you really need to look out for is that you aren't, overly coddling these players who aren't as good. Now, they absolutely deserve a good time. They absolutely deserve to have fun, but also you should not be bailing them out. And it should not be the case that they're horrible decisions, or if they do make a horrible decision and another player or another two players have to, step in and use all their resources to save that character. I think it is absolutely appropriate to sort of have a conversation, maybe not in the exact moment of the combat, but afterwards, and explain to that player why what they did was bad and why that doesn't work. Now, it doesn't mean that they need to be like punished for it, but it should at least be brought up. Again, it's that mentor role. It's not that you're getting fired. It's not that I have any ability to command you, but part of what I'm here to do is to sort of to teach you and to instruct you. And I think that's important. That being said, you could also, I mean, I remember one time, we had a campaign. I was a player. Smith was a GM. And we had our buddy Rich, who was a cleric. And there was like a question over who was going to get some treasure. It was a nice piece of gear in the treasure loot. And a bunch of us were kind of all squabbling about it, saying why our character deserves it. And then the cleric, our buddy Rich, just very quietly goes, well, if any of you ever want to be healed again, you're going to give it to me. And everyone went, all right, it's the cleric. The cleric gets the good piece of loot, because we're like, well, sometimes you just got to drop the hammer and just say, look, if you ever want healing again, you can give me the good loot. And then that's fine. So yes, assuming they actually want to learn. I mean, we talked about this at the beginning, but this is overarching the whole thing. You could lead a horse to water. You cannot make them drink. If part of the reason that your players are bad at the game is because they don't give a shit about the game, about you, about your time, about the fellow players, that is a bigger problem than a skill differential. Because the assumption here is that by playing in an environment that encourages them to grow and by offering them assistance and help so that they can get through some of the tougher moments while correcting their behavior and pointing out their mistakes will eventually get them to the point where they do become at least a reasonable player, if not a fantastic player. But if they have zero interest in doing that, then you have a bigger problem. And honestly, at that point, obviously the simple answer is to say, get better players, but that's pretty not helpful. What I would say is that if you do have players who seem very uninterested in learning how to play, say, your Pathfinder 2 game, maybe you are playing the wrong game. Maybe you should be playing Fate. Maybe you should be playing Dragonbane. Maybe you should go pick up, Shadow Dark or Old School Essentials or something very basic. Maybe you should go pick up a 1 or 2 page RPG from itch.io, because the fact of the matter is, if you have a game that has a great deal of complexity and you have some players who are really encouraged by that, they're really interested in that, they really dig deep into that, and you have other players who couldn't give a shit, then you are going to just there's the margin of skill gap is just going to grow out of control very, very, very quickly. Oh, what's up? We got John in the house. John, good to see you, buddy. Saw you earlier today, too, over on the other stream. Moondruid, good evening to you. Doc Flamingo in the house. Welcome, Doc Flamingo. Good to have you here. Now, asking the player what their learning style is, would you learn better with advice in the moment or advice post-session? I think asking people about their learning style is a little bit much. My advice would, generally speaking, be like not after the session, not in the moment, but like maybe after the combat. After most combats, or after, because so far all we've been talking about is basically the tactical game, right? We've been talking about combat so far. There's always that sort of post-combat break. A lot of times people get something to eat, get something to drink, go to the bathroom. There's the healing. There's the what loot did they have, right? There's always like 5 to 10 minutes. That is a great time to sort of, point out something to somebody and have a conversation. Now, 99% of people aren't receptive to feedback. I mean, I don't know if it's 99%, but I don't know. I mean, again, I hesitate to say don't be with those people. I mean, you definitely have to learn how to give good feedback, right? You definitely have to learn how to provide good feedback. That is a skill into itself. You can't be, again, you have to right size the stuff. People always in the comments are always like, oh, you guys be nice to Bob. Bob's one of my greatest friends, and I know Bob, and Bob hangs, Bob wants it straight, and, Bob likes to shoot the shit, and Bob likes to mess around. And so, yeah, like when we give feedback to Bob, it'd be like, Bob, what you did may have been one of the dumbest things I've ever seen ever in a role-playing game, ever, just so you know. Right. That's feedback I can give to Bob. Is that feedback I would give to, if I was playing with a brand new patron that I never met before, we're playing at Origins, we're playing, Dungeon World or something. Would I give that advice to them? No. Yes, I was definitely going into a very much into a Billy Madison quote there. So you get a point for that, London. Sean just visited Great Lakes Game Emporium and saw dirt. Sean, you're in Cleveland? That's crazy. Or I should say you're in Mentor? The hell are you doing up here? I just want people who have read their character sheet. That's enough of a bar. Well, and that's also kind of the point, Karama. Okay, if you have people for whom reading the character sheet is a high enough of a bar, then what the hell are you doing playing a game like Pathfinder 2 or D&D 4th edition? Right? Like that's asking way too much information. Case in point, let's go over to the PDF browser here. Right? That's it. This is a basic, this character here on the left, that is a basic D&D character. Strength 17, Int 8, Wiz 10, Dex 7, Con 15, Charisma 6, Level 1, 0 experience point, needs 2,000. They've got a couple saving throws. They've got their attack rolls all listed down because you didn't really have base attack bonus back then. You had a to-hit table. Obviously, if you can do the math, you can figure out what this person's quote-unquote armor class is or what their attack bonus is. And then they've got like 5 lines of equipment. They have boots, 3 armors, and 6 hit points. And their name is Borg the Fighter. This is, short of maybe Fate Accelerated Edition, about the most basic character sheet that you could get. If your players can't handle Pathfinder 2 character sheets and 4th edition character sheets, and again, I don't blame them. Those are very complex games. Maybe you need to play a simpler game, because the fact of the matter is they do need to at least be able to know what's on their character sheet. I mean, they don't need to know it in the first session, and they don't need to know it in the second session, but I'm very clear. I mean, as a GM, call me a dick, but I have certain expectations for people at my table. We've been talking about ways that other players can help them and deal with it, but some of it comes down to you need to have players who are willing to take feedback, and you need to be willing to give that feedback and do so in a constructive way, but do so in a meaningful way, and just, bake it down. Mindblown says Karn is even more basic. Fantastic. Even better. I think Index Card RPG might be more basic. I mean, you need to, and here's the thing. I'm not saying that you need to play that game forever. What I'm saying is you're trying to start them off learning math in a game of calculus. You need to start them off with, basic addition and subtraction, right? Basic arithmetic. Then you can advance into algebra, into geometry, into trigonometry, into pre-calc, right? And then keep going on and on. And yeah, some players want to go all the way up to differential equations. Other players say, you know what? I learned basic algebra and some trigonometry and geometry, and that's good enough for me. I don't even need to learn calculus. I don't need this for my job, right? So that's fine too. But you need to respect that. But if you are going to play in a game that requires you to be able to learn that, you have to at least be, you don't have to be there for the first session, but you have to at least be willing to get there, after the first, 4 to 6 sessions. When we were playing, we had started the channel, so we were being a little bit more, professional about it. But I kind of chewed out my players because I said, this is embarrassing. I said, you all are on a TV show, right? You're on a YouTube channel, and we're getting hundreds of views of people watching us play that, play that game. And you don't even know what the game is. That's embarrassing. You expect people to pay us money and you don't even know how to play the fucking game. But you know what? I don't even care about that. What I do care about is it's disrespectful to me, the game master, because I am putting in a ton of work and you are basically expecting me to pick up the slack for you. And I find that to be unacceptable. You're not paying me to do this. So by all means, learn how to play the game or don't play. Either is fine with me. I'd love to have you here, but not if you're not willing to show me some basic common courtesy and respect. And those are tough conversations. A lot of people don't like to have those conversations. I am comfortable having those conversations. And as a result, some people left the show. Some people left the channel. Some people were basically not okay with that feedback and essentially with that, I don't want to call it ultimatum, but it is my game. Other people said, you know what? You're absolutely right. I do need to, I need to go home and I need to read this book. Because I will say, while I would never tell anybody that for the first session, you need to have read a book, you should, when the game starts, show the person, maybe not literally because it'll overwhelm them, but if they really want to, you know, if you're just trying RPGs for the first time, but you should basically say, look, I'm not saying you have to do it tonight. I'm not saying you have to do it this week, but what I need from you is a agreement that you are going to read the entire rule book. At some point, you know, you don't have to read literally every spell description. You don't have to literally read every feat. But if we are playing Dungeons and Dragons, or we're playing Pathfinder 2, or we're playing Pendragon, or we're playing whatever game we're playing, I expect for you within the first month or two to have read the fucking manual and know how the game works. Full stop. Full stop. I don't need you to be the expert player. I don't need you to never have to ask a question, but you need to show me that minimal level of respect. And anything less is unacceptable. Because otherwise, what are we doing here? What are you doing here? You're just expecting me to just entertain you like I'm some sort of court jester, some sort of circus clown? Fuck you. Right? Fuck you, pay me, right? So, yeah, you know, I don't want to make it seem overly harsh, but, you know, if you have a player who's, you know, if you have any person in your life who's taking advantage of you, you should stop that, you know, right? In general. And again, you know, Mind Blown makes a good point too. Look, I would actually expect for a person who is interested in my game to eventually learn to expand to know the breadth of the entire game system. But at a minimum, you should at least know how your character works. You should know what's written down on your character sheet. You should know what your feats do. If you took a spell, by God, you should know what the spell does. If you need to bring it up on Nethys, if you need a printout of the card, that's fine. But fundamentally, you should understand how these things work. And the trend of knowledge should at least be positive, right? Like you should at least be showing that you are getting this improvement. So it takes work. Now, again, there are things that you can do. There's shortcuts that you can do, you know, where, again, you can stick a better player with a less powerful class or in a support role. But if you want those quote unquote worse players to get better, and again, we're really focusing on the tactical aspects here for the first half, then you need to be, you know, you need to have that conversation with them. Now, this is where I get to more of the combat and tactics shows from our channel. I know a lot of people are like, we really want to play Pathfinder 2, so I showed them the combat and tactics videos. And I'm like, that's kind of rough. What I am saying is that after you've been playing Pathfinder 2 for a couple of sessions, and maybe the players have gained a level or two, and then they've expressed an interest and they have shown that you are sitting down and they are engaging with the game, then you say, hey, here's this video that shows you how much deeper this game goes. But again, remember, some players will never want to get that deep. And so then you either have to accept that they are going to never be the quote unquote best player at your table, or you need to find a game system that, and I say the term comes down to their level, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. There's a lot of advantages to playing a very less complex, more rules light game. And maybe that's a better game for you and your group. And sometimes it's not anybody's fault, you know. I've got a young kid at home and a baby on the way, and I'm working a job, and I work, you know, I have to work overtime, and I don't have a lot of time for this, man. I'd love to play. So if a player came to me like that, and they say, I'd love to play, I love playing, but that's my life right now. So then I'm thinking, okay, so this guy has no time, and the time he does have is probably going to be trying to catching up on sleep. He's working his ass off. Sounds like a perfect time to pull out a 500-page rule book. No. That's not the time. I know he might want to play that game. I might want to play that game, but that's not the game. Unless I'm willing to just be, you know, constantly dissatisfied. That's not the game. We need to find the right game. The game that he can engage with. And, you know, quite frankly, to be fair to him, right? Have you ever been given, you know, a test or been given an assignment at work, and you're like, this isn't fair because this is way more complicated than anything that I was prepared for or that it was ever expected of me. And I feel like betrayed. I think, expecting somebody to go and learn some massive tome when that's not what they wanted to sign up for, I think is kind of on that same level. So Solana is suggesting Honey Heist. It doesn't have to be as basic as Honey Heist. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with Honey Heist, but there are plenty of games out there that would probably match that player's level. You should set up an environment where that player is going to succeed. Let's see here. Lol, talking about my life there or something. I'm not sure. We've all been there. We've all been given, unfair assignments and had to, been forced to deal with it. It's one thing when it's your livelihood. It's one thing when it's your job or, maybe it's an unfair, an unfair ask from a family member or from a spouse. But when it's the game, when it's your fun time, that's completely, crazy. Generally speaking, yes, Omen Owl, character creation time is kind of a meta, pretty good analogy for how complicated a game is. That being said, there are some games which, and this is where we get into the more, the other half of this conversation. Because I love Fate. I think Fate's great. I think Fate Accelerated Edition is one of the versions of the game I would always suggest for new players to play. And the characters are extremely simple. However, there is a complexity to Fate which is not necessarily readily apparent. Now, ironically, it actually is pretty easy for people who've never played role-playing games before. It's a lot harder for people who have played D&D. And that's because there's this idea of how does a role-playing game operate and how am I used to it operating and how am I used to playing the game? It's kind of like I've heard that like if you don't speak Spanish or French, that learning one of those languages is, is reasonably easy. But like I took Spanish all throughout high school and college. And then I took a French course and I remember it was really tough for me because it was similar enough to Spanish in some ways that I kept trying I would always remember it from the Spanish instead of the French. And so I think that's something to be said about like RPGs. Like once you've learned how to play RPGs, it sort of sets up this sort of engram of this is how RPGs function. And games like Fate do take a different approach. John, speaking of Fate, obligatory super chat. I feel like a lot of PF2 don't realize they are playing a tactics game. They think it's a smacktics game. Now, John, you'll have to explain to me, what is a smacktics game? That I do not know. I don't know that term. Well, the other thing too, and while you wait to define what smacktics is for me, thank you by the way for the super chat. Yes, John, this is exactly what I was trying to say. You keep throwing out Fate as a simple game. It's not complicated, but it's definitely complex. 100% agree. I'd argue you need to gaff even more Fate in D20. I completely agree. And that's what I was trying to say. In my game, we always talk about the way that complexity can be viewed. And I find that Fate Accelerated Edition is the game itself is not very complicated, but its nuances can be very complex and the way that aspects can, interact with them. And I find that it's easier with people who don't have any preconceptions of D&D or RPGs because that's all they know. That's the only world that they've learned. So when you ask someone who's played D&D their whole life to play Fate, you're asking them to learn Fate, but you're also kind of asking them to unlearn D&D. And that's really tough. Yeah, exactly. I agree. There's definitely more Fate. But John, you'll still have to tell me what a smacktics game is. That being said, I will say I kind of agree with John. A lot of modern D&D games, 4th edition D&D, 5th edition D&D to a certain extent, certainly Pathfinder 2. However, the more complex the rules are for flanking, these are war games. They're role-playing games only because back in the 1970s, people started playing the Kyros and going down into the dungeons underneath Castle Blackmore. They are war games. And these are games that are fundamentally based around, fighting and combat and tactics. And a lot of the game mechanics, and I mean a lot of the game mechanics in these games are based around fighting. And it is a tactics game, 100%. Smacktics is a term I just made up for people who just want to go in and plow through shit with their sword. Got it. Okay, fair enough. And I agree with you, John. I mean, I do think that Pathfinder 2 can sometimes feel like a Smacktics game if you're fighting the right encounters. But think Bob. Yes, think Bob. Free question. Yeah, Bob is delicious with it. Yes, I mean that is definitely the case. I mean, Pathfinder 2, in many ways, is a punishingly complex game. Now the math is very generous, and if you're only throwing moderate encounters at party members, I mean it should be fine. But the game, I think Pathfinder 2 asks a lot of you to be not just good at it, but proficient at it. Now, if that excites you, then that is a huge opportunity because there's so much to get into. There's so much meat on the bone for you to really, really sink your teeth into. But if you're not interested in that, it's going to be a bad time. It's going to be a bad time. Luke, that's a young man's game. Yeah. I mean, you're not wrong. You're not wrong, Luke. It all depends on what you and your players are willing to invest into a game and how much time and effort, energy people want to spend, thinking about it and talking about it. All right. I don't want to go super late tonight. So the second thing I want to talk about is we've been talking mostly about mechanics and character builds and things of that nature. But I do want to talk about the other side, the softer side of role-playing games. And Omanal, I just kind of randomly just chatted here. I noticed skill-based games rather than level-based games tend to focus less on combat, though it was definitely in there. Yeah, that's generally true, I think. It doesn't have to be, but it just does seem like it does tend to work out that way. So how do you teach someone to be a good role player? How do you teach someone to be creative? How do you teach someone to be, engaging and interesting and funny at the table? Well, you don't. You definitely cannot, force someone or teach someone how to do that. That being said, this is advice we've given before many times. The key is kind of a three-step approach. Let's go. All right. I guess it's time. All right. Okay. All right. So we got our whiteboard up here. Good deal. Good deal. Okay. So when we talk about ways to create a better, I guess I would say, to train or to create a better role-playing player, there's a couple things you have to realize, okay? Things you have to understand. Remember, GM job is very, very difficult. Part of that reason is because you need to be more than just a game master, right? You kind of need to be at least a minor in psychology. So the first step is you have to understand, okay, what a player's engagement desire is. Now, this is something I've talked a lot about in PBTA games. What do I mean by this? we can make it this pretty simple, right? We can think of this in terms of tier. You have tier 1, you have tier 2, and you have tier 3. Okay? Some players, when they come to a role-playing game, I want to say that they want to lurk, okay? But they are there to be a part of the group, but they are not there to guide it. They are not there to steer it. They are there to be an individual contributor and to do their bid for king and country, and just, they're happy to be just part of the, just to be along for the ride. And that doesn't mean that you should ignore them. We'll talk about this, but you do need to identify first, is my player basically in need of a low amount of attention and spotlight, an average amount, or a high amount? All right. Because part of your job as a game master is to make sure that players are getting the right amount of fill of what they want out of the game. But the other thing is realize that, a character who really wants to engage, that's a deep well. That's a well that you can go to many times per session when you need player agency, when you need player creativity, when you need player action. This player isn't necessarily less valuable, but you do need to understand that if you go to this player time and time and time again, not only one, are they not going to be very happy about it, but also you're not going to get much out of them. They don't want to engage on that level of the game. Okay. So players may want, now that players change, they may start in one place and change to another place. Okay. So certain players want to be in the spotlight, and other players don't want as much time and attention. Okay. The second is understand a player's, and I'm just going to call this creative ability. So, and again, this could be tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3. What do I mean by this? Look, the fact of the matter is, some players may, independent of their desire to engage, may have different levels of engagement. Okay. And there's also something to be said about taste and tone and what they're trying to do. But like, if I have a player who is very, 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 very good, creative comfort, I like that. We'll change it. Thank you, Rocket Sheep. If I have a player who has really high comfort with their creativity, then I can feel very confident in a tough spot to call them out. What GM Scott is calling description on demand, which was a topic we were talking about on the Discord the other day. You're right. Description on demand, Justin Alexander's article, not to put a final point on it, I would not do description on a demand to this character. I would do description on demand to this character, because this character or this player is going to be able to roll with those punches, and they're going to be able to have a lot of freedom in that regard. So how might I change this? Well, this assessment is essentially telling us the quantity. How often should we be making it a point to go to that player? All right. This is telling us the quality of what we are going to get from that person. Okay. Does this mean that this person is only going to give us crap? No. Their input is valuable and they should be part of the storytelling process as well. But it does mean you do need to take certain steps. A player at your table who has a high amount of creative comfort, let's say Aaron Smith, I can literally throw him a curveball and expect, almost demand, that he come up with some idea that is not only makes sense, but it's clever, funny, and appropriate. And he will. He'll deliver. All right. And ideally, he'll deliver in a way that surprises and delights me. Now, I might have another player at my table. Let's say I'm playing the Root actual play. Okay. And I'm playing with Aaron. I'm playing with Bob, who I'm a little bit more comfortable with, but I'm also playing with Nick and Dirt. They've never played PBTA games before, and they haven't played that many role-playing games. Okay. I'm not going to throw them the same curveball that I'm going to throw Aaron. I'm going to throw them a softball. I'm going to throw them a slow speeds pitch. I'm going to tell them, hey, is it A or is it B? I'm not asking you to come up with something. I'm asking you just to pick. I'm asking you to choose. Okay? I'm not going to put you on the spot. A great way to engage with this player is to just check in with them instead of asking them. All right? So basically, you're sort of going around the table, and then you lean over to that player and you say, basically, is there anything that you want to add? Or is there anything else that we should know? Or do you have anything that you would think would make this more interesting? Right? You're not demanding that they give you an answer. Okay. You're just giving them the opportunity. You're just giving them that, hey, if you want to chime in, this is the time to do it. And maybe the player will respond. A lot of times a player like this will respond with, yeah, but I just don't know. Like basically they're saying, I want to engage in the game. I just don't know how. And you're like, okay, great. We can go with that. And then you can basically frame it as one of two choices or three choices, or maybe even another player kind of chimes in and they kind of, maybe offer up their own character. Like if we were playing a game of, let's say, Blades in the Dark, and, we're talking about the characters, moving into a new part of town, and, the next door neighbors, and I'm kind of describing the thing, and I lean over, to the player who has a low amount of creative comfort. And I went and I go, other players have been like, oh yeah, it's down by the docks and it's got this cool dock. And I leaned it over to this other player and I go, hey, is there anything that you want to add to the neighborhood? And the player goes, yeah, I just don't know what, And it's like, okay, that player is telling me I want to engage right now. I just don't know how. And I could say, okay. And I go, oh, okay, awesome. Well, how about, we haven't really talked about who's our neighbor? Who's next door to us? Hold. Do they come up with anything? And they're kind of like, sometimes they might come to an idea and come to it. And if they don't respond, you follow up with, all right, is it could be a bar, which would be pretty generic. But if you want something a little bit more spicy, how about our other options are it's a bar, or it's a brothel, or how about it's the home of a crazy, eccentric scientist who conducts all sorts of weird, crazy experiments. And then you just let them pick between those three things. And you'll notice that there's sort of like three different levels of intensity. Just a bar, a brothel, a little bit more risque, and then kind of full mad hat, crazy mad scientist. Now, the creative pressure in that world was on me, the game master, to come up with those three ideas for the player. But Derek says the brothel bar lab, obviously. Of course. You see, what we're creating is a new generation of street harlot, right? Bigger, better, faster, stronger. No, it's you know what? It's Blades in the Dark. These are reanimated. It's like Frankenstein's monster, but horrors. We've reanimated the dead. Anyways, off topic. So that player has been given their small window and their ability to put their stamp. And a lot of times I have found that players who start off very, very, very unengaged, once they make that choice, once the difficult part, once the choice has been made, they buy in a lot when it comes to that item of the game. So in other words, if they chose, let's say, the mad eccentric scientist, at the time they were almost very reluctant to do that. But now in their mind, they kind of own that. That's kind of their thing. And as a group and as a GM, I should make sure that I go out of my way to make sure that when something comes up involving that place or that thing, that I'm always taking that opportunity to loop back to that player and make sure that they feel like they are being consulted, right? Because they have a degree of ownership over that. And even though their player character may not really have any sort of connection to it or ownership of it, the player will. And that is how you sort of build up that creative comfort. And this goes beyond just, creating narrative meta currency and all this other crap. It comes down to just, talking in character. It comes into expressing your character's feelings. How does your character feel? a character who has a very high creative comfort. You know, if you're playing with me at a table and something happens in game and we're kind of all in character, you know, I might be like, I would tell everybody, I'm like, also, okay, by the way, like everybody here knows that my character is just totally in love with this woman. He is falling for her head over heels. And I'm even in my brain thinking like, oh, this will be fun for the story. It'll be good for the GM as a hook, you know, to have fun with that and run with that and tear my character's heartstrings to pieces. It'll be a lot of fun. I'm going to add that. I'm going to volunteer that. But a character who doesn't have that level of comfort is a great opportunity just to check in with them. When, you know, something happens in a game, you just turn to them and say, hey, so-and-so just happened. Does your character feel any sort of way that, like, are you angry about that at all? Or is your character upset about that at all? And the player might think about it and go, no, I don't think so. And then you go, okay, do you feel any sort of way about it? Right? You have to sort of ask leading questions. You have to get them to engage. And again, it's an educational process. It's a slow, potentially painful process that will, you know, build up their muscles. And again, back in the day, in the the late 80s, early 90s, for me and my friends, we were all starting at the same place on the same books with the same games. And the games were a lot simpler, and we just kind of learned this stuff from the ground up. But now players are coming into these really extreme games. They've got, you know, I'm sitting here trying to talk to you about basic elements of the fundamental nature of role-playing games, like engaging, being mindful of your players. If your character's trying to figure out what their, you know, attack bonus is because they have 3 or 4 floating modifiers along with penalties to the creature's armor class, that's going to eat up into their time. And again, I go back to the lesson I learned from watching Bob bloom, I should say maybe suffer a little bit while GMing Pathfinder 2 and watching him bloom while GMing Dragonbane, because Dragonbane put less load on him. And as a game master, it allowed him to be more engaging and allowed him more creative comfort. And I can't help but feel like the same is true for players as well. So I do think that there's sort of an easy approach to that. It just takes time and it takes real attention. And this is one of the reasons why I often say that, like, playing online, especially playing online without cameras, very tough for me. Because when I'm game mastering, I'm not just reading out of some monster manual or some adventure book. I'm looking at you. I'm watching you to figure out where are you at from an engagement perspective, and how can I bring you into the game more? What are the ways that I can make you feel like this is your game? Because that's ultimately what I'm really trying to do. Is I want everybody to feel that sense of ownership of the story, of the world, of everything, so that it feels real to you inside. You know, that's kind of the key. So yeah, I guess we kind of have a matrix here, right? Of there's the there's the creative comfort and creative desire. Now, of course, you will technically, I guess. I mean, I would actually say this, actually, now that we're here, now that I'm drawing this. Obviously, I've never thought of this before, but I would say that these are your 2 biggest problem areas on this matrix. Why? Because this person can tend to be a spotlight hog, and this person can tend to be way too much of a wallflower. So I think that these are the 2 areas that you have to really kind of figure out a solution for the most, because, you know, it's not easy. I think anything else in between you can work with, right? If someone's really creative, they just don't really want to engage that much. That's fine. Just, you know, they'll drop gold. Not every minute, not every hour, maybe once a session. but what they do drop is gold. And what I'm saying though is like, I don't think that this here or this here are bad necessarily. I think it's these two here in the corner that are the problems. So for this person, right, this is the person who is like, how do we define introverts and extroverts with this matrix though? I don't necessarily know that we do define introverts and extroverts through this matrix. And in my mind, introverts and extroverts independently have these markings. The only difference is introverts, right, lose energy from this process, and extroverts gain energy from this process. But just because an introvert is losing energy from a process doesn't mean that that's not where they want to be, and it doesn't mean that that's what they want to be doing. They just understand that, this is something that they are limited in their capability of doing. If they were to do this day in and day out, it would rob them of all their energy. But that's the way I've always thought about introverts and extroverts is, does this activity boost my energy level or eat my energy? But just because something is, eating up my energy level doesn't mean that I shouldn't be doing it. I mean, that's what energy levels are for. I know people who will go to a gaming convention and they are introverts and they play their hearts out and they are talking to strangers and they are enjoying everything. But if you can think of it, their internal social battery, which is why they have it, it's there to be used, is going down and down and down and down and down and down. And then once like Gen Con is over, I don't see that person for like a month, right? They like go into hiding and they just, they're at home alone, they're reading, they're watching movies, and that's them, building up their energy level. And it's not that they shouldn't go to Gen Con. It's not that they shouldn't be participating. It's just that understand that there's a certain limitation to that. It's like running a marathon. It takes a certain amount of energy. So whereas some people will come back from Gen Con and be hyped, like, I can't wait. I'm so excited. That convention really, excited me to do more, and I want to do more and more and more. That's great. I mean, that's totally fine. I mean, generally speaking, I would say that extroverts are probably more likely to end up on this side of the map, and introverts are generally more likely to end up on this side of the map. But I don't necessarily know that that's 100% true. I think there's plenty of overlap between that. And I there are times when it's weird, like that, for me, it can almost change from system to system. There are some system, like, I'll be honest with you, when I'm done playing a session of Pathfinder 2, I'm exhausted. When I am done, and that's, even if I'm playing like a pre-published adventure, Abomination Vaults, right? I'm just playing it out of there. On the other hand, if I play like a 3 or 4 hour session of zero prep or no prep, low prep, Blaze in the Dark, Dungeon World, Root, when that session ends, I'm buzzing. I'm excited. I'm actually, there's more things I want to talk about, things I want to write down, new ideas that I have. I'm at a higher energy level than I was when I started. So it can vary for me from game to game. X in the center for win. Well, unfortunately, I mean, the 2-2 is also pretty good too. Right. And also that's true. Introverts, it also depends a great deal on who they're with. And even then, your creative comfort could also depend very greatly on who you're with. If you're with a group of people that you trust and you're happy to do that, your creative comfort level may be higher. And so some of that is earning that and learning, earning that trust, learning that trust with a new group of people. Cephalodog says, I'm desire 3, comfort 2, that's a great place to be. Introvert. I love TTRPGs, but they sap my energy. Conventions wear me out within an hour or two. And that's totally acceptable. It's totally fine. And you understand that is just, part of your, part of your personality, part of your makeup. And that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be engaging with RPGs. You love it, but it does drain you. It saps your energy, I love playing racquetball. Love playing racquetball. But after I play racquetball for an hour, I mean, I'm done for the rest of the day. I mean, it's tough. It's difficult for me to get out. I have to take a shower, sit down on the couch. It's hard for me to get up off that couch. Doesn't mean I don't want to play racquetball. In fact, just the opposite. I'm like, let me rest and recover, and I want to get back out there. But some things do take your energy. I have a social battery that I spend on RPGs, and then that's it. I'm done. And that's fine. That's a lot of people. I mean, I would argue Smith, who I've played with, for 25, 30 years, he's that. I mean, that's where he chooses to spend his precious amount of energy is in RPGs. I need to turn this into an inversion matrix. Yes, of course. Right. Yeah. The environment can be a huge deal too. I mean, and this goes without saying that, by the way, like creative comfort can be affected by things like, the system that you're playing. It could be affected by the genre. It could be affected by the tone, right? Like you all know Matt Holloway from the channel. He played Burl in our Rise of the Rune Lords campaign, the Gnome Sorcerer. Matt is one of the funniest people I've never known in my entire life. If I was trying to play a super serious game with Matt, it would be it would stifle his creative comfort because Matt's a super funny guy. This doesn't necessarily mean he always wants to like turn everything into a fart joke, just the opposite. He's witty, he's punny. He likes, really being clever and witty. So for him, his creative comfort is much higher when we were playing in a game that doesn't take itself so seriously, right? D&D is really a great game. D&D, in my opinion, does not take itself so seriously. I mean, there's an entire line of spells that summon a gigantic smashing hand that flies through the air and punches people and pushes people. I mean, let's call it what it is. It's a silly game. But if I'm playing like a super hyper serious game, if I was playing Legend of the Five Rings, I don't know that would be a good fit for Matt because that's not where his creative comfort truly lies. He's much more comedic in his tone and timing. Yeah, that's totally reasonable, Beowulf. I mean, that's a good enough reason for me. And you know what, Forlorn Knight, me too, buddy. I mean, Pathfinder 2, I will admit, it drains me. It takes a lot of my mental processing power, for sure. Tic-tac-toe. Oh, I wasn't even thinking of tic-tac-toe. It's been a long week. I played in a Warhammer Fantasy Role-Playing 4th edition campaign with 4 other noobs. Weirdly smooth learning curve, very complex system, but merciless and random. And that lack of agency makes it surprisingly easy to engage with. You know what? There's also something to be said about that. When we talk about the original basic D&D, you rolled 3d6 in order. You made no choices. The game just said, nope, that's your strength, that's your int, that's your whiz, that's your charisma. And then it's like, oh, well, you can't just be whatever class you want. You only qualify for a couple of classes. And in basic D&D, there were no races. Elf was a class race. Dwarf was a class race. So if you were either fighter or cleric or thief or elf or dwarf or halfling or wizard. So, the choices were greatly reduced in the complexity set for sure. Yeah. Super Bleeder. That is fantastic. Super Bleeder. I've told this story before, but there's a very famous situation. My wizard, Asinius, would literally spend like all of his XP to create magical items for the party, right? I took such pride in it. Now, of course, in 3rd edition, you could not de-level from spending experience. In other words, if you needed 12,000 experience points to be level 10, you could spend your experience down to 12,000, but then you could not spend your experience and de-level to make more magical items. So there's a very famous story, which I've told before here, but my wizard was very safely into the level and then spent hundreds and hundreds of experience points making a bunch of items for the rest of the party. So I was level 11, and I basically got down to within 20 or 30 or 40 experience points of losing my level. But everybody had really cool items. So then we go, and we're in this dungeon, and we encounter a banshee, which is made up. There wasn't a banshee at the time, so it was house ruled. And it casts Wail the Banshee. Now, I passed the fort save, so I don't die, but my familiar fails the fort save, and it dies. And at that time, in 3rd edition, when your familiar died, you lost like 100 XP or 200 XP or 300 XP. But it was enough experience point loss that I went from level 11 to just a little bit below, and I was just at the top of level 10, right? So I had all of level 10's experience. I was just a few hundred away, but my Raven familiar had just died. Well, the next round, the Banshee screamed again, and I failed my fort save this time, which meant I died. But we were not high enough level to have true resurrection. The only thing I could get was a resurrection spell. And when you gained a resurrection spell, you lost a level of experience and went back to halfway through the prior level, which means I was level 11. I lost a couple hundred experience points just to the very top of 10. I died. I got raised, which meant I lost all of 10. Then I lost half of 9, and I lost I don't even know, many tens of thousands of experience points in literally the span of like 2 combat rounds. It was awesome. Even at the time, I wasn't mad. I was like, this is obviously ridiculous and stupid and dumb. But see, I loved it because I knew that's a story I'm going to remember. That story I'm going to tell again and again. It's a story that means a lot to me. It's funny to me. It's not something that you could plan. It's not something that we could write down. It just happened to be what happened. And it was a combination of the GM's dungeon and my player decisions and my choice to make all that experience and have my familiar and going through that room and all this stuff. It became particularly brutal because the GM Smith had known that this creature was kind of like broken. And he had given us in the dungeon earlier, like a sword or something that could create a silence bubble around it. And the whole idea was that if you were paying attention and put 1 and 1 and 2 and 2 together, you would figure out, oh, the creature in the dark vault is a banshee. And if we have the sword and we make it silent around ourselves, we'll be immune to her screaming wails and it'll be a much easier fight. But we failed to figure that out, and as a result, several characters died, including my character, who actually lost 2 entire levels of experience in 12 seconds. You know what? Time to pay attention. Let's just say that. Oh yes, you're right. I said wizard. I meant magic user. Yes, of course. So yeah, I don't know that I have like too much else to really go into because so much of this is really just soft skills and knowing your players, but it's a willingness as a GM to be able to engage with your players. So, if anybody has any questions or whatever, we've had a couple people super chat and tip tonight, which is really nice. Thank you so much for all of that. We are still in exile. I have the truck rented. We're going to be moving the very, very last stuff, the stone walls to a storage unit this Saturday. The internet's disconnected. Everything's torn down. The table's in pieces. So we are full and truly moved out of the studio, and we're hopefully going to be getting set up at Smith's at some point, and we'll continue from there. But yeah, I mean, if anybody has questions or topics or things that they would like to ask or talk about, please feel free. Could be about this or it could be about something else. That's totally fine, I suppose. In the meantime, I will say that next week is, I think, Golden Week, and we've got a bunch of people running games that are going to be Japanese or Asian inspired, particularly Japanese. Bob has borrowed my Legend of the Five Rings intro box set. He's going to be running Legend of the Five Rings starter set for some lucky group. I'm interested to see how that goes. Set up the studio and the storage place. Well, the storage place is 10 feet by 10 feet, GM Scott. So, and has no electricity and no heating and no cooling. So it might be a little bit tough there. Erica says, as a player who's trying to get better at role playing, that was a super helpful diagram. It's difficult things to set goals or assess progression on. Yeah. And I don't think that there's no right or wrong answer. Some players, don't want to contribute that much, creatively, but it's important to just make sure that, your needs are being met and you're not being pushed too far and you're not being left to the sidelines, So hyped for Golden Week. Yeah. I mean, I wish I had more time. If I didn't have this stupid studio thing that I've been busy with, I would have loved to have rolled. I would have loved to have rolled, run my own Legend of the Five Rings. I mean, if I was going to run something for Golden Week, it would be one of my favorite games of all time, which is Legend of the Five Rings, of course. But so good. Okay. This is just talk between us friends. Like this is okay. Am I being gatekeepy? Yes, but it's Bob, and I don't mind throwing Bob under the bus. Here's the problem I have. Okay. I think very highly of Legend of the Five Rings, but it's a complicated game, and I think it takes a very skilled GM to really get it right. And what I am worried about is that Bob it's not Dragonbane. You know what I mean? It's not Dragonbane is great for Bob. I'm worried that Bob is going to run this Legend of the Five Rings, and I'm sure he'll do a fantastic job. but I'm worried that he won't do it like complete justice. And the people who play it will go like, oh yeah, Legend of the Five Rings, that was pretty cool, but it was nothing special. And I'll be like, no, there was an opportunity for these people to fall in love with this game system. And Bob didn't have all of the skills needed to deliver. And so it's like, there's a part of me where I'm almost like, no, I should be running all of these games, but I really don't have. I do not have the time. And the fact that Bob is willing to do it is amazing and awesome. And I'm sure he'll do great, but it was something that's just my head, like in my logic where you're like, I like this game so much. I want it to be an amazing experience for the people who are running it, who are going to be playing in it. So, Anime's mom, I recently started jamming a new batch of PF2 players, and I suggested they watch your PF2 Tactics series. Some things are outdated. Womp womp. It does happen. But the majority of it's still great stuff. You were younger. I was in my 30s. I'm now in my 40s. So there's that. I've also lost like 50 or 60 pounds, but yeah, I mean, those are good videos. They hold up. I mean, the nice thing about Remaster not really fundamentally changing the game too much is that those tactics videos didn't really go out of usefulness. Interesting. Hey, Ikemos.
Ikemos tipped $3. Exile rations. Also, yes, games that present less agency upfront are good starters. People take them as they are. Many newbies come to D20F games expecting the game to cater to their fantasy. Also trust Bob. Bob is a cherry blossom.
Bob is definitely a cherry blossom. Thank you for that tip. But yes, yeah, I mean, I think that overwhelming players with too many choices in the game, what we would call complication, or what I would call complication, I think it distracts them from what the point of a role-playing game is, especially when they're new, like to the genre. But even a lot of people who've been playing RPGs for years, I don't think really ever truly learned what an RPG game is. And it should be a conversation. This is one of the reasons I love PBTA games. It's not because I think 2D6 is awesome. It's because the game understands at a fundamental level that it's really all about the back and forth between the players and the GM and each other. And it's not about the character sheet and the mechanics. The mechanics and the character sheet can be great, but they are great in the context of making the conversation great. And so that's to me what defines a role-playing game, is that we have this shared fictional space, that we are cohabitating, and that the mechanics occasionally intrude on. That is what role-playing games are to me. That's what makes them different from just sitting around telling stories, and it's what makes them different from, say, a board game. Does Legend of the Five Rings compare to Shogun? Well, I have not seen Shogun, but I will say that Legend of the Five Rings is a very heavily Japan-inspired fantasy role-playing game. It has magic and supernatural creatures and beings. That is fundamentally a game about honor and glory, and your character's torn duty between their giri, which is their sworn duty to their lord. Being a samurai literally means you are to serve. Your lord will have given you commands, and so following your lord's command is your giri. It's your sworn duty as a samurai. But each samurai also has what is called a ninjo, and a ninjo is your character's true personal desire. So your giri may be to, advance on the peasant village and crush the rebellion. That's what your giri is. But your heart's desire, your ninjo, is to make the beautiful peasant commoner woman who lives in the village, your wife, which of course could never be allowed in your society 18 ways to Sunday. But, the heart wants what the heart wants. And the game is fundamentally a samurai drama simulator, in that the mechanics are designed to twist the knives of your samurais and create, literally in the back of the GM book, there's a thing called the Wheel of Discord, where, I don't think it's not literally like a spinning wheel, but if you could make it a spinning wheel, you would. And on the outside are all the different characters' giris, and on the inside are all the different characters' ninjos. In other words, on the outside is everybody's duties, and on the inside is everybody's desires. And the idea is that you randomly match them up and create a way that there's discord, so that one character's desire conflicts with another character's duty, and you create this point of tension, and then you say and go, and players figure it out, and maybe people get killed, or maybe your honor is besmirched, or maybe your character buries their feelings deep in order to do what it is that they are supposed to do, and maybe they will be a true honorable samurai, or maybe they say to hell with that. I'm going to give into my life's. I'm going to give into my heart's desire. And mechanically, all of those ideas are supported by the game. It's not just stuff you write down in your character sheet and it doesn't mean anything. No, like you have a honor score, you have a glory score. So there's definitely a lot of stuff at work there. I just think it's an amazing game. It could happen. It could happen. Who knows? I'm a little afraid that Bob will animate it up. I'm afraid that people are going to be running up swords and that they're going to be flipping through the air 500 times, 100 feet in the air. Yeah, I mean, that's part of my concern. I won't lie, GM Scott. That is absolutely part of my concerns. Derek, I don't know if you are talking about Legend of Five Rings Roll and Keep, the original D10 system, but I actually don't really like that system. I really like the new Fantasy Flight Games 5th edition system, which uses the custom proprietary dice. Oh yeah, I've pretty much listened to everything Morrow has ever talked about. So I think I do know the one that you're talking about, and it's really, really good. The storyline is also very good. The world lore is pretty good. Interesting. I want to play Legend of the Five Rings, just not in Rokugan. Interesting. What do you have against Rokugan? Doesn't have a PvP undercurrent. I mean, it depends on the type of campaign that you have. If you have characters who serve different lords and have different objectives, then it could very much have a PvP undercurrent. On the other hand, if all of the characters are working for the same or serving the same daimyo, the same lord, it's very likely that they may all have the same duty. Now, that doesn't mean that another player may choose to neglect that duty in order to follow their desire, and that might cause another character to intervene and, I don't know, challenge that person to a duel to the death. Who knows? Shit could go sideways real quick. Some little shade being thrown on Beowulf here. It's king of liking systems, but not their settings. Interesting. Yeah, Rokugan's okay. I think it's an interesting setting. All right. Well, cool. I think we kind of covered some philosophical ramblings. Hopefully we had something there that's interesting to you. Again, there's no easy answer. I wish there was like 5 tips to make your players better. And it's not. It's a slow process. It's a painful process. But it really comes down to evaluating, number one, are these the type of people who even want to be here? And no matter how much you want a player to get better, whether it's at the tactics of the combat game or whether it's at, playing in character and coming up with creative ideas and coming up with fun suggestions, if the player basically doesn't want to be there, if the player is just checking their phone, if the player has no interest in being there, then you might want to consider either a different game. Maybe this game is just too complex for them to ever engage on, or maybe that this is not the game for them. And if getting rid of that player isn't an option, then the best thing that you could do is paint them into a corner, make them a character that's unimportant. When the NPC shows up and tells the party that, one of them is destined to slay the Demon King, don't make it that character. Make that character the secondary or tertiary side support character who's in a lot of the scenes but doesn't really do a whole lot else. Make them as, meaningless and unimportant as you can, because they're not going to give you much. And they're kind of almost being there almost maliciously at a certain point. I understand there are people you can't get rid of. Now, if they stifle at that, maybe that'd be the push that they need to start trying to engage more. Maybe. But, you know, if you're stuck with someone and they don't want to get any better and they suck, then the number one thing that you should do is don't rely on them. Don't build your character, don't build your campaign arcs around them. Don't really include them. They're just like, you ever watch like a sitcom from the 90s and there's like maybe like some sister or brother that's like the middle child, or like, you know, it's just the character that never really takes off. And then like halfway through the show, they just write the character off and they never talk about the character again. Yeah, sure. The character was there for the first couple seasons, but then one day you look around and there's no middle child, right? The Chuck went into a closet or whatever. Well, that's the same thing that you want to do here. I'm not saying that you have to like punish them, but don't make the campaign or any sort of major things revolve around them. Don't make sure that if there's somebody who, you know, again, this is assuming that they are basically just like, I have to play with this person. They are a package deal. They aren't leaving. It's a family thing, or it's a spouse thing, or it's a partner thing. I get it. That happens, you know. So, and if you can't deal with that, then don't let them ruin the session by making them, you know, important. And then when it comes down to it, they you know, shit all over what you're trying to do here. Well, yeah, we could go into detail about that, but I think that fundamentally is a problem with the game. I don't really think you should just pick all these different clans. So I would expect people to pick the same clan, actually. It's interesting. Where does creative comfort fall with draw from historical examples or creative desire? I don't know what that means. Where does creative comfort fall with draw from historical examples? I don't know. The wall with the Shadowlands and all that stuff is just to drawing from. Where does creative comfort fall with drawing from historical examples? I don't know. I don't know what you mean by historical examples. Like, do you mean like from my personal history? I mean, you know, if honestly, if you want to see that, go watch the Root actual play. Go watch the beginning of Rise of the Runelords versus go watch the beginning of Quest for the Frozen Flame. When I was playing Quest for the Frozen Flame, I had 4 players: Smith, Kaz, Tim, who are all veteran players who I've played with for many, many years. And then Bob, who was still relatively new at the time, but had been, you know, really, had been playing a lot of Pathfinder 2 and playing a lot of Pathfinder 2 with me. It just come out of the Runelords campaign and a different campaign. So when I start that game, watch how much I quickly am throwing fastballs and curveballs at the players. Whereas if you go back to the beginning of Rise of the Runelords, I had 3 players who had never played an RPG before ever. And nobody had played Pathfinder 2. So my approach is very, very, very different. How much explaining I do, how much hand holding I do, how much I, you know, sort of bring it in. So you were saying something completely different. Using history, Roman history, Asian history, to create how a character acts. Well, I mean, that's, I don't know. I don't know that actually fits into this matrix. I mean, if someone is really wanting to express their character in any capacity, whether they're using a historical context to do so, or a fantasy context, or an imaginary context, and they are really interested in expressing that, then already they are probably high on the desire capability. And then if they have done their research and they know what they're talking about and it's appropriate to this type of game, then I would hopefully say that their creative capability there is pretty high. Does that fall within being creative? Oh, Kyle. Half of what I do is copycatting, man. It's tropes. It's just me going like, hey, I really like this thing and I'm putting it into my game. I mean, I do that all the time. There's nothing, that's not, being creative in that context does not mean that you need to create something new. You're not writing for HBO. You're not writing for Amazon Prime. It's just your home game. Make it something funny, make it something interesting, make it something that you're passionate about. And fuck all the rest. That doesn't matter. Aaron and I do tropes all the time. Like all the time. So often. Yeah, I mean, everybody tropes it to a certain extent. I mean, Michael's absolutely correct. So I, a lot of times, a lot of times all it really is like, that is, I don't agree with everything Matt Colville says. It's a good percentage. Let me be very clear about this. But take the stuff you love and put it in your games is fantastic advice. So I am all about tropes. All about tropes. Tropes are tropes for a reason. No shame. Hope everybody is good. Lol, we are good. We're having fun here. But yeah, I mean, like, Derek, I'm getting too skinny and make the rest of us look bad. Stop it. Hey, listen, I've been working hard, man. It's been a process. To be fair, I was not a bigger guy until, COVID, losing business, depression, staying at home, never leaving the house. Then I got big. But before that, I was always, around 200, 210 pounds. It was, 3 or 4 years of really rough years, where I put on all the weight. But thank you, Frosty. I appreciate the compliment disguised as a joke. Nice. I don't want that for you either, Scott. Come on. We should all get healthy so we can all play role-playing games forever. Yeah, like let me be clear about something. If I wouldn't, but if I were to play a game that was like, it wouldn't even have to necessarily be a Old West, Frontier West game. I would have absolutely no problem of being like, I'm gonna play this character. And my total inspiration on this is Val Kilmer, Doc Holliday from Tombstone. I'm going to be channeling that character. I might even use the quotes from that character because I really like that character. I really like that movie. And these people probably don't really know the movie or they don't know it that well. And if they do know the movie that well, they're going to be like, oh yeah, that's awesome. I love that. I love that scene, And so maybe I'm playing a fantasy game, Maybe I'm playing a gunslinger in Pathfinder 2 and I'm in Galarian. And, my character's sitting there outside and I go, I'm your Huckleberry. I'm saying it because, yeah, I love that line and who doesn't? That Val Kilmer has so many good lines in that, aside from you not dying, why are you still doing this? Because Wyatt Earp is my friend. Hell, I got a lot of friends. I don't. Such a good line. Just amazing dialogue. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. And I don't really like Westerns. Bruce Wayne, John Wayne, Clint Eastwood, miss me with all that. Fistful of Dollars, all that stuff. Not a fan. Spaghetti Westerns, not a fan. But Tombstone was just a cut above. Fantastic movie. Anyways, favorite KOC moment is still when Ryan Dale knew exactly what sci-fi movie I stole from within 10 minutes of me starting the Mouth from a Ship one shot. Yeah, but it wasn't right. It's a great moment. It's a fantastic moment. It's like you sharing your nerddom, right? It's you being like, we all get it. These are my people, right? We all are understanding what is happening. This happens all the time. Like when Aaron and I are playing games, role-playing games, and he'll do something, and I know what he's doing. He's doing something from Wheel of Time, and he knows that I know that he is doing that. And instead of me being like, that's so lame, I'll lean into it, even like I'll even start joking about it. I'll be like, oh, you start hearing rustling of bushes around you and Trollocs begin flooding out into the field. And there is no Trollocs in this game that we're playing, but it's like, because we're leaning into it and we're having fun with it. And I love tropes. I love doing that. To me, that is one of the bedrocks of how I play role-playing games. I quoted 99 with my Faerunian gnome cleric. That's fantastic. You got to watch it again. It's a great movie. And it's so watchable. It's just so watchable. Yeah, it's fantastic. Evening, Boothby. We are wrapping up. And that's awesome. I mean, everybody likes different parts, but that is definitely the game. That is definitely the Western movie for me. But I mean, part of the fun of it too, though, is taking a character that you love from one game or one genre, and then kind of transposing them. And that's where the creativity comes in. Okay, I'm playing in a game that doesn't have guns, right? In Pathfinder 2, there's a gunslinger, but I'm playing a game that doesn't have guns. But can I make a Val Kilmer, Doc Holliday character in a high fantasy game? What would Val Kilmer's Doc Holliday look like in Kryn, right? What would they look like in Dragonlance? And that's cool. That's fun, right? Like, how do I meld that? And a lot of times that's all it takes to be creative. Take something you're really, really, really passionate about and a lot about, and then figure out how to remix it, remix into the world, the genre, the style or whatever the game that you're playing. And then you just go from there. And when all is said and done, at the end of the day, you will have created a unique interpretation of that character through your eyes in this unique game world, which was created by everybody. And that's what's really, really cool. So, and that is why I play role-playing games. I play role-playing games so that when we sit down together, I get to be delighted. I get to be, and this is whether I'm a player or a game master, I get to be delighted by the fun things that you brought into our story, our collaborative story. George, I have based at least 2 characters, if not more, straight on Mad Mardigan. Willow's my favorite movie growing up. I don't know if it's still my favorite movie of all time, but for a long time it very much was. And the I'm the greatest swordsman that ever lived. Mad Mardigan, a lover, I've loved the character, and maybe I just really like Val Kilmer. So anyways, that is definitely part of my wheelhouse. A lot of what I do is just regurgitating tropes or just, cross-pollinating games, things like, what if I remix Game of Thrones with Lost? What do I get there? What if I take like some of my favorite things from Warhammer and I cross-pollinate them with Wheel of Time, right? And then you get something new. And then, because I'm not plotting it all out, I'm just setting up the dominoes. My players get to take what I was creating and they get to change it and add it and mutate it in so many millions of different ways, and the dice get involved. And so we end up with something that is very, very, very unlike with what I would intend to do. As the advice says, I think John Harper, maybe it's actually Vincent Baker in Apocalypse World. He says, hang on loosely to your creations. And that's true whether you're a player or a game master. And I know some people don't want to hear that, but I think you should hold on loosely to your players, to your character. And what I mean by that is, do not have such tight control or tight reign over your characters that you are in control of them. And I know that not everybody agrees with that, but that is definitely my style. I mean, I'm there to be inspired and changed and amazed by the people around me. So, and I think everybody has value. There's only a handful of people who are those people at the top upper left quadrant of the thing who do. And those people can ruin a game. I mean, I'll be honest with you. But everybody else I think you can work with. The only thing is you have to just decide, and some of it is having hard conversations. Are we playing the right game? Are they willing to do the work to get to the skill level that they need? Are the better players set up in a position to mentor, guide these characters, not lead them, not command them, not, boss them around, but mentor them? Am I taking the opportunities to give them spotlight moments? Am I, right sizing that attention? Am I giving them options? Am I giving them softballs? Am I making it easy for them to contribute so that they get comfortable with it? And most importantly, and then of all of this, is the game that we're playing the right game? Is this a game that they are going to be engaged, interested, and have the capability to? You might have a character who's like, I really, 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 really love Pathfinder 2. I want to play Pathfinder 2. And it's like, well, you don't want to read any of the book though. No, I don't. How can you say you really want to play Pathfinder 2 if you don't even like want to learn the rules of the game? Like, some people are weird. I don't know how to tell you, but like that person, you know, you might have to have some conversations with them. So, all right. Well, I think that's going to do it for us. I did want to just do a 2-hour stream tonight. So, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Karima. Thank you, John. Thank you, Ikamos, for the tips and the support. I also got several seconds of mute also. Strange. Interesting. I don't know. Well, it looks like it's back now. So hopefully everybody heard me there. But in any case, we will be back next week with stream number 200, which the patrons have voted on. It's going to be a very special stream where we do something completely normal. So looking forward to that and hanging out with you all at that time. I'm going to be up at the studio this weekend making the final move out. So pretty bittersweet moment for all of us, but it's good. You know, we change, we adapt, we grow. And that's the journey of life. Not the first time I have had to shut down a studio, won't be the last. So that is going to do it for me. Again, thank you so much to everybody who came out tonight and supported us. Thank you to all of the patrons for your continued support. It's kind of a slow month for us, April. I know, you know, between moving out of the studio and our Tuesdays have been taken up by us, me and Bob, just going up and disassembling and boxing up lights and just, you know, 3-4 years worth of KOLC stuff. And so, you know, the Tuesday streams have sort of taken a hit this month. I've been busy on the weekends, so there hasn't really been as many Sunday streams. So, you know, it's been a quiet month. We haven't gained a lot of new patrons or new subs, but I appreciate those of you who have stuck with us and continue to make this an incredibly rewarding and amazing community. I appreciate each and every single one of you each and every single day. So thank you so much for your continued work, and I look forward to seeing you next time on Nights of Last Call. Peace out, everybody.